Coming up on In the Life.
A trip to Atlanta to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Life in South Africa. What does its new constitution promise lesbians and gays? Plus an up-close and personal interview with the 1992 Playgirl Man of the Year, Dirk Shafer. All up next on In the Life. In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Gill Foundation, James C. Hormel, the Third National Gay and Lesbian Business and Consumer Expo, and In the Life's National Membership Network.
In the
Welcome to In the Life and Atlanta. It is here where the civil rights movement was born, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King is honored in a march that bears his name and a center that carries his legacy. Hello, I'm Katherine Linton. Every year, thousands of people come to Atlanta from all over the country to participate in the National March of Celebration, a march which commemorates Dr. King's birthday. But today's march, unlike the civil rights marches of the 60s, is host to a strong and visible gay and lesbian contingent. In this episode, we'll take a look at this march, its organizers, and its message, and explore the connections and alliances between African American civil rights and gay and lesbian rights. We begin by speaking with James Orange, who as a young man in 1963 began organizing marches with Martin Luther King and continues organizing to this day.
If you look at the gay and the lesbian community, that's one of the communities that's doing right things. We have to allow them to come in and participate and support it, because if they want to participate in the dream, they have a right to do it. Just like if straight people want to participate, they have a right to do it. Just like if Italians, Jews, Africans, whatever the case may be. People shouldn't be criticized for whatever their sexual preferences are, or whatever their ideologies or philosophies. When they come here during King Week, we all come as brothers and sisters.
Besides the large gay and lesbian contingent in the march, there have also been a number of gay and lesbian Americans as co-grand marshals, like Congressman Barney Frank. This year, gay activist Urvashi Vad and House Speaker Newt Gingrich's half-sister, Candace, hold that honor.
And it's really exciting because it's like an acknowledgement that we are part of one civil rights movement.
In previous marches, the gay and lesbian contingent has been mostly white. But according to Lori Coleman, this year's gay liaison to the march, that pattern is beginning to change.
This year we have the first annual Bayard Rustin pre-march rally as a way of showing the community that there are black gays and lesbians, that we do participate, and that we have left no part of our identity at home.
The widow of Dr. King, Coretta Scott King, has taken a leadership position in supporting non-discrimination legislation for gays and lesbians.
I support this legislation because lesbian and gay people are a permanent part of the American workforce.
Mrs. King's top aide for the last 9 years, Linton Colthran, is himself a leader in the gay and lesbian community in Atlanta.
And so being out, and certainly, again, she has learned things about the community through me.
The road Coretta Scott King has taken in support of gays and lesbians began with her late husband's teachings.
Like Martin, I don't believe you can stand for freedom for one group of people and deny it to others.
This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, that all men are created equal.
In today's march commemorating Martin Luther King, as with most marches, youth activists play a major role, and Wendy O'Neill is one of them. We spoke to Wendy at Spellman College, where she's a fine arts major.
I grew up in New Orleans, Born and raised. My father was involved in the civil rights movement in SNCC, and my mother is a teacher. I decided to come to Spellman because it was far enough away from home, and I knew I wanted to go out of state. And I thought, well, this is a historically black women's college, and it's perfect for me. Spellman is struggling with diversity, just like many other campuses are around the country. And I think the assumption here is that since we're all black women, we're all going to be the same. And that's not true. So we've had to deal with homophobia on all levels.
Wendy challenged that homophobia when she helped form the Spellman Lesbian Bisexual Alliance.
We recognized here at Spellman, once we got kind of into organizing, that we didn't know what we were doing. And that we needed some help. And a friend of mine knew some people who had told them about this institute that was happening.
Wendy applied to the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force's Youth Leadership Training Institute to learn the skills of grassroots organizing. In the summer of 1995, she, along with 24 other young leaders from all over the country, were in the Institute's first graduating class.
I learned about taking care of myself. As an organizer, to organize for the long haul. I learned how to do specifics when I'm organizing, how to go through the steps of designing something, you know, how to get it from in my head to an actual thing. There's now a 25-person strong national youth organizing network. And I can call any of these people anytime I need to for support, just to say hello, just to say, you know, I had exams and I worked all day, you know, a 12-hour shift, and I, you know, had to cook dinner for my girlfriend and I'm tired. It was the best experience that it could have possibly been.
Wendy's latest project is organizing a monthly story circle.
It's a circle of people who've been called together to tell stories to each other based on your own experiences. For me, it's useful as an organizing tool to find out who's in my community, what we think is important about being in that community, what are the issues that we're living with in intersection. For example, I know that we're dealing with racism, sexism, homophobia, class issues, and we'll get there. What was important to me in my project was that it be a celebration of my life and the people that I live with. I think being an activist is about loving who you are and sharing it, and making sure that that we live in a world that is not hostile to anyone's existence.
Increasingly, young people like Wendy O'Neill are organizing for rights and public recognition. And to some people, this is part of an agenda that must be stopped. Miguel Arenas reports.
In recent years, more and more lesbians and gay men working in public schools have come out of the closet. With this new visibility, the right wing has stepped up its assault on an open discussion of homosexuality in the schools and have increasingly targeted gay and lesbian teachers, school board members, and students.
There were at least 68 local conflicts over gay and lesbian issues in public schools documented last year, and the radical right is active in school board elections across the country. Last August, the school board in Merrimack, New Hampshire, voted to instate a policy called Prohibition of Alternative Lifestyle Instruction, which prohibits any program or activity that has either the purpose or effect of encouraging or supporting homosexuality as a positive lifestyle alternative.
The school board there has been running down a whole laundry list of things. They've tried to mandate teaching evolution as not the way people were created and instead creationism. They've mandated a moment of silence. It really is part of a broader agenda to use the schools, which are funded by the public, as a vehicle to teach one segment of the community's values as the only values worth holding in the community.
In Des Moines, Iowa, Jonathan Wilson served on the school board for 12 years before he was targeted by the right wing for being gay. in January 1995, in the midst of a swelling controversy, Wilson came out during a school board meeting that was televised statewide.
The negative things that have been said in recent weeks about gay people, the awful stereotypes, are lies. I know they're lies because I am a gay person. Now this community can know that they're lies too, because this community knows me, and they've known me for almost a quarter of a century.
In his re-election campaign, Wilson raised more money and got more votes than is usual for a school board race. But he was outspent by 2-1, and he lost in a landslide to a right-wing candidate.
I think that they've done a phenomenal job of organizing on the local level. And they also have the added advantage, which compared to the gay community where there is not a large number of parents, within the Christian Coalition community there are a large number of parents. But that ability to organize on every single local level and compete in every single local school board race is an enormous advantage for them. And I think that's why they are having such success right now, because they literally are in every school board election across the country.
Last November, Jerry Crane came out to his students in a small town in Michigan. Although he has received a lot of support, the school board voted unanimously that homosexuality violates the dominant moral standard of the district's community. Penny Colthran lost her job because she included 3 books with gay content on a reading list. As these attacks increase, the lesbian and gay community finds new ways to respond. In New York City, a group of young activists is being trained to work with the media.
When they're taking away services, programs, and gay teachers, those youth are not, those youth who are questioning their sexuality don't see themselves reflected anywhere, and they don't have a space then to commune or to get together.
A lot of youth, I mean, whether they're queer or not, don't have the life experience that a mature adult person has, and they don't have the resources to deal with stigmatism and homophobia that an adult would have. And they're much more vulnerable that way and much more open to abuse and to taking that abuse into themselves and internalizing all of that.
I think the reason why programs are cut and money is held back and people are fired and people are oppressed, it's for the fact of dehumanizing people. It's pointing to the world and saying, see, they're not like us, they're not normal.
Last year, Ralph Reed, who's executive director of the Christian Coalition, said, "Education is our #1 priority for the rest of this decade." They know where the ball game is. It's in our schools.
Just watching the Christian Right and the Christian Coalition, they've taken religious ideas and religious values and turned them into a political campaign. And I think it's amazing the extent to which this has invaded our society.
On the federal level, there are things such as the Helms-Smith Amendment, which would strip funding from any school that did not teach that homosexuality was an aberrant lifestyle.
The push for federal legislation is increasingly framed in terms of parents' rights.
The whole issue of parents' rights and the issue that the government somehow is usurping those rights from parents seems to be a real galvanizing issue for people. And as you know, any number of the freshmen in Congress of the new freshman class from '94 are on a bill, have co-sponsored a bill to abolish the Department of Education. So it's all part and parcel of a massive attack on federal government, on public institutions.
We have to worry about the fact that if you were to take a private poll that no one would ever see of Congress, I would say fully 2/3 would do nothing, pass no legislation that harms lesbians and gays. But having said that, will a majority? The answer is yes. A majority will pass legislation harmful to us because they are the biggest cowards that you've ever met in your life. And they believe that this wave of right-wing ideology is going to last forever.
And most frighteningly, we're seeing things on the local school board level. The Christian Coalition has set a goal of taking over 2,500 school boards by the end of this decade. Ralph Reed said recently that he'd rather have 2,500 school boards than the White House.
Lou Sheldon of the Traditional Values Coalition has singled out public schools in Los Angeles for attack because of progressive programs like the Eagle Center. It's an alternative high school for lesbian and gay youth who drop out of regular school.
What led me to drop out was all the stress and just being tired of living a lie. And you know, I wasn't out to my parents. I had no gay friends. No one I knew that was gay, and complete isolation.
But I was always teased about, even by my father, that, you know, calling me, you know, the F word, you know, faggot, you know, saying these things to me. And then if you hear it at school, and if you hear those kind of things, you start thinking, well, you know, something's wrong with me.
Coming to Eagle Center has meant a lot to me. I wrote a report on Eagle Center, and I even cried on it when I was doing it, because it's meant so much to me.
It's different than any other school I've ever been to. It's like, you're totally safe, you know? You can be whoever you are. It doesn't matter.
I would like every gay and lesbian adult to change their notion of parenthood so that we start thinking of every gay and lesbian child as our own biological child. And we fight for those children as if they were our own biological children.
As attempts to discredit gays and lesbians intensify, learning about positive gay role models and their contributions throughout history becomes more and more important. One such role model is Bayard Rustin, a gay man and the chief organizer of the 1963 March on Washington, led by Martin Luther King. While Bayard Rustin was eventually forced out of his top position because of his homosexuality, there is one woman determined to keep the spirit of his work alive.
Your book to describe another great man, Bayard Rustin.
I'm here with Charlene Cothran, organizer of the Bayard Rustin Rally. Charlene, why is it important to honor Bayard Rustin today, and why is it important that this contingent march openly in the march?
It's very important, particularly here in the South, in Atlanta, with all eyes on Atlanta, that the gay and lesbian movement be a part of the civil rights movement, as well as, and more specifically, the African-American gay and lesbian community take homage of Bayard Rustin being an out black gay man back in the 40s. We need that as a positive role model to help break up the silence.
Bayard Rustin found himself ostracized from the very community to which he was so devoted simply because of his homosexuality. Today, however, 33 years later, we find gay African-American leaders and organizations striving to educate all communities about issues of race and sexuality. One emerging leader is the head of the National Black Lesbian and Gay Leadership Forum, Keith Boykin. Here's Tanya Barfield with the story.
The National Black Gay and Lesbian Leadership Forum was founded in 1988 as a means to combat racism, sexism, and homophobia. Keith Boykin was fresh out of college in '88. He then went on to law school, held positions on 2 presidential campaigns, and worked for 2 years in the Clinton White House before becoming the Leadership Forum's executive director this past year. Today, through education programs and coalition building, Boykin and the Leadership Forum work to strengthen existing institutions for black gay men and lesbians and bridge the gaps between diverse communities and identities.
Much of our work as an organization is in educating the various communities that the members are part of. So, for example, we would go to the black community and educate them about homosexuality and homophobia. We'd go to the gay and lesbian community and educate them also about racism and about the causes and concerns of African Americans. So there's a duality that takes place, and we work on sort of bridging the gap between the 2 communities that we represent. From my personal perspective, it's important not to fall into the trap of creating a hierarchy of oppression, where one part of your identity becomes less important than another part. Mel Boozer, who spoke at the 1980 Democratic Convention as an openly gay representative from the District of Columbia, made a statement that I think is very profound and reaches me as well. He said, "I know what it feels like to be called nigger, and I know what it feels like to be called faggot, and I can sum up the difference in one word: none."
Boykin joined the Clinton White House staff in 1992 when he was hired by George Stephanopoulos. While there, he often worked on issues of concern to the gay and lesbian community, and he was instrumental in organizing the landmark White House meeting between Clinton and gay leaders in the spring of '93. He left the White House in 1994 and began work on his first book.
The book is called One More River to Cross, Black and Gay in America, which will be published by Doubleday this year. The purpose of the book, when I set out to write it, was to describe the experience of what it feels like to be both black and gay. I interviewed hundreds of different people from across the country, some of whom were black and some were not, some were gay and some were straight. I learned that black people are not as homophobic as people seem to think that they are, that we are. In fact, my analysis seems to indicate that blacks are probably less homophobic than other communities. We have to make sure that we understand that the black community is also the community that elects, by and large, members of the Congressional Black Caucus, who are, for the most part, the most supportive group in Congress of any demographic group on gay and lesbian issues.
That support was recognized last October with an award to the Congressional Black Caucus by the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force.
Well, there are a few really high-profile homophobes in the black community, like Minister Farrakhan, who completely, I think, distort the representation of what the rest of the black community thinks about these issues.
It was Farrakhan's Million Man March last October that presented Boykin with one of his first major issues as executive director.
The National Black Gay and Lesbian Leadership Forum Board of Directors met in September of 1995 to discuss the issue of the Million Man March. At that time, there was some concern about whether we wanted to encourage our members or other black lesbians and gay men to participate. After very serious and careful discussion and debate, we decided that we would encourage people to participate, but only if they were to do so openly and visibly about who they were, not to hide a part of their identity or not to be ashamed of who they were. And certainly they're to be ready to challenge any sort of homophobia that might come up or any sort of instances of sexism that we felt were of concern. So it was important that we participate, and we participate on our own terms. After that decision was made, we organized a series of activities around the march, cultural, social, political activities, including our own rally. And we marched onto the mall where the event occurred, and we were warmly received, very enthusiastic, positive responses. I felt all along the march route. The throng of black men who lined the streets and who were in the streets parted like the Red Sea when we came through chanting "gay men of African descent." I mean, it was just a wonderful, powerful, motivating, moving, inspiring experience for me, and I think for all the people who were there. I think what we learned from this experience, though, was that when we come out and when we are not ashamed about who we are as black gay men and lesbians, that our community, the black community, not only accept us, they respect us more.
Hosting conferences, writing books, and leading national organizations aren't the only ways to educate the public about what it means to be both black and gay. There's also the theater. And this is a venue Sonia Hempel chose when she formed the African American Lesbian Theater Company, Think It's Not When It Is, a troupe devoted to bringing gay and people of color positive imagery to all types of communities.
You really don't understand, do you, Helen? You don't understand what it's like to walk around with a part of you that's invisible. It's like having a third hand that you have to hide. You know it's there, it helps you out, it gives you pleasure. It even gives you a sense of pride because it's unique. But no one else knows it's there. And if they did, they'd probably want to chop it off because it's too abnormal to really exist.
I think it is important to bridge the gap between the heterosexual community and the gay and lesbian community. I think It's Not When It Is, the name came about because when a person first meets you, they automatically assume that you're heterosexual in some instances. And so we said, well, think it's not when it is. So you think that I'm heterosexual, but I'm not.
Sonia founded Think It's Not When It Is in New York City in 1990 with her play Sensuality. Since then, the troupe has toured the country, and Sonia has formed an offshoot of her group in Atlanta.
Well, Atlanta has a thriving gay community, and I really think that in 5 years we're going to see a lot of changes in Atlanta. And I just wanted to be there on the forefront.
While performing takes precedence with the troupe, they have another dimension as well.
Our company also does lesbian sensitivity workshops, and what we do is role play. We'll do a scene from the play.
You know, sometimes I just can't stand men. I wish we women had our own planet.
How could you say that? You know, I was going to invite you to the Pan-African Rally on Saturday, but I won't even bother. I see you're just one of those gay girls who hates men.
What?
Wait a minute, sweetheart. You don't know me well enough to start reading cards. My father is a black man, and so are my 4 brothers. 5 men I happen to love very dearly. I don't hate men. I just don't appreciate the chauvinistic ones who credit me on my looks rather than my abilities.
And then we'll have the audience also participate in the scene, and they'll do the role play. And it's brought about a lot of dialogue, because I think that that's what needs to be created, is dialogue.
I'm afraid of straight women. When they embrace me with their kindness and warmth, I feel shame. Shame that I cannot tell them who I really am, what I consist of totally.
One person who fought tirelessly to ease the shame and silence is Audre Lorde, whose spirit leads this group.
Audre Lorde has been a big influence on my life. When I was in college, I started reading her works, and she often talks about not being silent. What she says is that we weren't meant to survive here as lesbians, here as black lesbians in particular. But what we have to do is speak up for ourselves so that we can survive and so that people know we are here and we're here to stay.
Spellman Lesbian Bisexual Alliance, and you're watching In the Life.
Still to come on In the Life, a report on gay and lesbian life in South Africa since apartheid was dismantled, and special correspondent Kay Shelby interviews the Man of the Year. But first, in the 1950s and 60s, the civil rights movement found its strength in black churches, like the Ebenezer Baptist Church here in Atlanta, where Martin Luther King was a pastor. In its own struggle for civil rights, however, the gay and lesbian community has often found itself in conflict with many of America's churches. Still, for many gays and lesbians, religion remains an important aspect of their lives. Tonight, we'll look at 4 local and international religious organizations. Dignity, a group for Catholics, the Lavender Light Gospel Choir, whose members started the Unity Fellowship Church in 1985, New York City's Jewish congregation, Beit Simchat Torah, and the Metropolitan Community Church, which now has nearly 300 chapters worldwide. These are all congregations that have gone out on their own to search for a safe and supportive place to worship.
I hadn't thought much about being involved in a religious life because I stopped doing that when I became old enough to see that the women were doing all the work and the men were getting to wear the big hats.
God didn't create you so God could have something to sit around and hate. And I love to always tell gays and lesbians that over and over again. You didn't jump out of a jack-in-the-box and God said, oh, a little homosexual.
Our belief is that gay and lesbian sexuality is a gift from God, and it is to be celebrated and not merely accepted or tolerated.
I think the reason that lesbian and gay people have started going back into church is just for the mere sake of assembly, to have a place to talk about spirituality.
This has been a long time coming, you just don't know.
I founded the church October the 6th, 1968, as a special outreach into the gay and lesbian community, but with its doors open to all. We felt as though we needed a place to worship God. Certainly I did. And it was probably out of my needs more than anybody else's that Metropolitan Community Church started. Having gone to church all my life and having preached all of my teen years and through into my 20s, it was very, very bad. All at once, when I came to terms with my homosexuality, shared that finally with the church, I was excommunicated. They told me, God can't love you, and you can't love God. October the 6th, 1968, 12 people showed up in my home. Only 3 people out of that group came forward for communion, but there wasn't a dry in the place. And we knew that we were a part of something historical.
We praise the Lord for that today. Isn't it good to be home? All right. Amen. God bless you.
Congregation Beit Simchat Torah was formed in 1973 by a small group of mostly men who rejected the idea that one had to choose either being gay or being Jewish. Before 1973, no gay Jew would be welcome with their partner in a synagogue with family membership, for instance. People are here not to please their grandmother. People aren't here to make an impression on their neighbors. They want to ask very hard, serious questions about life, about Judaism, about love, about meaning, about what's inside our souls, about what the world means and what the world demands of us. That's very exciting, and they want to know, does Judaism have a response to it?
Dignity was started in 1969 in San Diego, and it was started by a priest in response to the needs of gay and lesbian Catholics who wanted to stay in the church and yet felt alienated from the church because of the church's position on homosexuality. In 1986, a letter was issued by the Vatican which stated that homosexuality was a disorder, and on the basis of that letter, Dignity chapters were expelled from Catholic parishes all around the country. We are here, we're in the Catholic Church. We would like to reform the Catholic Church, and we would like to bring healing to gay and lesbian Catholics who do feel alienated from the Church.
I started Lavender Light with Tony Teal and Lydell Jackson back in 1985. Lydell and I belonged to an organization called Black and White Men Together at the time, which is now Men of All Colors Together. Our favorite thing to do at the end of the Black Caucus was to sing Negro spirituals and gospels or some other Black sacred music. And it just started speaking to a need or to a memory that we had all grown up in the church. And our experience had been that we all grew up in the church, but we all felt the need to leave the church because of the homophobia being preached from the pulpit.
The need for spirituality was something that was sort of buried, and I hadn't looked at it in a very long time since I was in my teens, and decided that what was happening in the church I grew up in was not filling any kind of need that I had. It was more religion and thou shalt not than this is where you go to feel the power of a higher power's love.
We know in our churches we don't bite our tongues. If we want to say gay and lesbian from the pulpit, we do. If we want to talk about political issues, we do. If we want to believe that Scripture gives us stories about gays and lesbians in Scriptures, we talk about that. If we're with our lovers, our spouses, our other halves, and we want to go to the altar holding hands for communion, we do. If you want to go to other churches who won't let you do that, that's fine, but that's not us.
Another reason that lesbian and gay people have started to assemble around spirituality is because of the profound death that we've seen in the last 10 years.
The AIDS epidemic has brought a lot of gay and lesbian people in touch with their spirituality, and I think that's reflected in membership in Dignity as well as many of the other gay religious organizations, because it's very difficult to find the kind of support, both psychological and spiritual, that people need when they're facing illness and when they're facing grieving.
If someone in the choir dies, or a family member or a friend or lover, the following concert or the concert at the end of that season will be dedicated to that person, to get that strength from that person that's gone on and, you know, be alive to speak their name.
Come on and lay your burden down, lay it down, let it fall.
There's always a need for us as a different kind of people to have our own institutions that speak to us as who we are.
And now, In the Life welcomes veteran journalist Kay Shelby as a special correspondent with an interview you won't want to miss.
Thank you, Katherine. Tonight, we have a special guest in store for you. Controversial and surprising. The Man of the Year. No, not that one. This one. Dirk Shafer was Playgirl magazine's Man of the Year for 1992. And for Dirk, What a year it was. Photo shoots, interviews, talk shows, and the celebrity status that comes with it.
Playgirl's 1992 Man of the Year, Dirk Shafer.
Many women and a fair share of men were all trying to find out the real story behind one of America's sexiest men. But in the end, no one really knew Dirk's real story. Well, you will tonight. And I think you'll find it surprising. Dirk Shafer, born and raised in Oklahoma, was steeped in Midwestern values. In 1985, he packed his bags for Los Angeles with hopes of becoming a big Hollywood director. Dirk started moonlighting as a model, but his natural attributes developed that side job into a career. One of those natural attributes is that he's gay, a fact unknown to Playgirl editors at the time.
What does it take to be a centerfold?
I think it takes, I think what the women are looking for are big feet. Am I right?
I spent the day with Dirk to delve into the life of a filmmaker turned centerfold turned filmmaker. Naturally, the day began at the gym.
Oh, good. Great. Are we gonna, how is it? Is it too heavy?
No, I think it's fine, because I really want this to burn. Yes.
And it's healthy. It's good for you. Have you quit smoking yet?
Are you kidding?
Thank you.
Next up, a shoot at the David Morgan Photography Studio in New York, arranged to promote Dirk's first feature film.
Excellent. A couple more. Excellent. Good. A little chuckle. Easy. Excellent. I think we got it. That's good. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
That's great.
That movie, Man of the Year, filmed in mock documentary style, recreates Dirk's reign as one of Playgirl's most popular centerfolds, as well as his journey out of the closet. The subject of the film was the subject of our talk, for there's more to this butch, buffed beefcake than meets the eye. Dirk, before you were a model, you were a filmmaker.
Right.
And you were nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah, I had a Student Academy Award nomination for one of my short films, but it still wasn't enough. I wasn't making a living at it, and that's when I started doing all these odd jobs. I was, you name it, I did it in Hollywood, and I got really distracted by the whole centerfold and modeling thing.
What is the ideal for the Playgirl Man of the Year?
They wanted me to be straight. They wanted me to be single, available.
How did your lover Michael feel about this deception?
He was into it in the beginning, but then I think he got really turned off by it because he was trying to live a more openly gay lifestyle himself, come out to his parents and more of his friends and family members. And here I was tugging at him, pulling him back into the closet and saying, no, not yet. I want you to be, you've got to play this part of my roommate.
You were outed during your reign as Man of the Year.
Yeah, I was backstage, and a production assistant was involved with a militant gay organization outed me to the producers, and then the segment producer. It was a terribly uncomfortable position to be in, and that's when it kind of all came to a head, and it was at the very end of the year.
As a serious broadcast journalist, I feel bound to ask you, did you really think you could get away with it? The masquerade?
I think that I thought that I could. And here's why. Because I think that every gay person in America has to pretend to be straight their entire lives. I mean, that's the sad truth, but most people in their jobs and for their family, and no matter what they're doing, they have to play straight. And it's basically, we're living in a straight world.
Didn't you feel just a little bit guilty pretending to be something you're not?
Yeah, very. It started eating away at me. But I felt like it was a job and I needed to fulfill my duties with them, like an actor would take on a part-time job. I felt like that's what I was doing.
If you had to do it all over again, would you do things differently?
I don't think I would do things differently if I could do it all over again. I certainly don't think it would be appropriate for me to have come out of the closet on the air when I was representing the magazine, so I don't think I would have done that. I think in this way, the movie is like a catharsis for me because I am coming out now, and the film is a great record of my point of view and perspective of what it was like to live that year in a straight man's shoes.
Your story, as way out and wacky as it is, could be seen as a metaphor for many people, gay or straight.
Exactly. We had women come up, a woman came up to me at a screening and said, "This is my story, a straight woman." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said,
because every day that I go to work, I have to wear a mask. I have to pretend like I'm something I'm not, because you're right, we all wear masks.
Friend, how well I know.
So, can one mix a career of modeling with directing? Well, after my day with Dirk, I'm bound to believe he just might pull it off.
From the skinny, stage-struck kid from Oklahoma who didn't quite fit in, to the object of desire for many men and women. From in front of the lens to the writer-director behind the camera, Dirk Shafer is certainly a man of the year who knows where he's going. This is Kay Shelby. We're in the life.
South Africa, a country that only a few years ago was subject to an international boycott because of its system of apartheid. When the people went to the polls and dismantled apartheid forever, President Nelson Mandela went to the people and made a promise to protect all South Africans from discrimination, including lesbians and gay men. In 1994, South Africa became the first country in the world to embrace a gay and lesbian non-discrimination clause in its constitution.
They speak of a constitutional, democratic political order in which, regardless of color, gender, religion, political opinion, or sexual orientation, the law will provide for the equal protection of all our citizens.
There's a sense in South Africa from the African National Congress that if we're going to put into place a society where human rights rule, then we have to look at all the ways that South Africans have been oppressed.
Because apartheid was not only about brutal racism and sexism, it was conservatism of all types. And so the apartheid system was all about regulating people's lives, regulating people's sexuality.
And the project of a liberated South Africa is to break down those categories and in so doing, to give all South Africans full rights.
Mark Gevisser is the co-editor, and Glenn Retief is a contributing writer of Defiant Desire, a book that explores the full range of gay and lesbian experience in a country with a complicated political landscape.
We've got within the pages of the book stories about gay miners, gay lesbian kids in townships, rural Afrikaans couples. We go pretty far back into history as well. And the point of it, I think what we were trying to do is we were trying to explode this myth, which is very powerful on the African continent, that homosexuality is a white colonial depredation that is contaminating the purity of African society.
While revealing the diversity of South Africa's gay community, the book also explores the many challenges the gay community now faces.
In my opinion, this question of the different impact of this clause on black and white in South Africa, this can't be separated from the issue of economic inequality in South Africa. Unless something is done to solve 50% unemployment in the black community in South Africa, unless something is done to solve millions and millions of people living in shanty towns, unless those kinds of issues are dealt with, what does a clause like this really mean for black gay people?
In 30 essays, Defiant Desire paints a clear picture that in a country with a recent history of severe economic and racial segregation, the gay experience can differ dramatically from community to community and person to person. These differences are also reflected in a short documentary called Out in Africa by young filmmaker Johnny Simmons.
The first thing was to accept myself as a gay person and to know that I'm going to live my life as a gay person.
I want to be openly known as a gay person. I think it is important.
I mean, being gay is just like who I am. I am what I am.
I met my first lover at the age of 17. And I was convinced that I love him, you know. Even though it was really quite difficult because he was a white man and I was a black guy. And I thought, well, for white people it was normal to be gay, or every white person was gay or somehow or another. But it was not something that African men would be.
people in Africa are discreet. An African man is supposed to be like a very secretive guy who does these things alone. No one should know what he's doing, you know. And that's why gay life is never talked about in Africa.
Growing up in Soweto, it's okay, but you don't get to do what you like in a town because, like, some other gay people get attacked and things like that. Okay, so you cannot be as open as you want to be. Nobody knows that I'm gay. Okay, so that's make it easier. That's like easy, but I'm sure people are wondering how come he doesn't have a girlfriend, you know? And then, well, my mother, my family, they also don't know. You know, I'm very scared to tell them. I just can't tell them, you know.
I have to really work hard and be a successful person to prove to the world, that to prove to other people here around me that to be gay doesn't mean that you're not a capable person.
Firstly, your fault is you're black. That's your fault. And then secondly, you're gay. That just makes it worse.
I don't really blame all white people. I mean, everything has been really destroyed by the apartheid system in the past, and it will remain like that for quite a long time. I think education is the most important thing, you know. I think we as black gay people, we got to educate the white gay communities, our individual in this country, you know, that we also human beings.
Some of the many ways we learn about gay and lesbian life in other countries is through films and documentaries like Out in Africa, or through books like Defiant Desire. There is one organization, however, that exposes injustices towards gays and lesbians directly and in person. The International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission recently took advantage of the United Nations 50th anniversary to deliver an international human rights update, a tribunal at the UN in New York, where 8 people from all different countries told their stories of extreme discrimination and abuse. One of those to testify was Ciprian Cucu from Romania, a country where it's illegal to engage in homosexual acts. At the age of 17, Ciprian and his first lover were turned into the police by Ciprian's own family.
After an argument with my family, I admitted that Marianne and I were lovers. To prove it, I showed them my diary. They blamed Marianne for the relationship. As a result, my sister then went to the police and lodged a complaint.
Ciprian and his lover were arrested. Marianne admitted everything, but when Ciprian denied the allegations, the police showed him his diary, which had been brought to them by his own sister. Marianne and Ciprian were both incarcerated.
Am fost despărțit de Marian și dus în secția pentru minori a arestului poliției.
Marianne and I were separated. I was taken to the preventive arrest ward for juveniles. Before I came in the cell, officers told the supervising inmate that a homosexual was going to be put in the room. As a result, he told me from the very start that I had to have sex with him if I did not want things to go very badly. At first I resisted, but after a few blows, I was forced to give in. It was the first time I was raped, but not the last.
Am fost forțat să cad de acord. Aceasta a fost prima, dar și nu ultima dată când am fost violat. În luna februarie, anchetatorul nostru din St. Nicolaul Mara,
In February, our investigator published an article in the Temesvara Police Weekly, in which our case was described in detail, including photographs of us with full presumption of our guilt. The article was picked up by a national newspaper and came to the attention of representatives of the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission in Romania. As a result, in May 1993, Marianne was finally released, awaiting trial. After my release, I was expelled from the last year of high school under the pretext that I had missed too many days of school. In fact, teachers declared my homosexuality a danger to the other students.
Marian a încercat să-și găsească o slujbă.
Marianne tried to find a job, but no business would hire him. When he finally found employment, he had to give it up because of harassment from his colleagues who knew about his case. We tried to continue our relationship, but it eventually ended because of the pressure we encountered from people who knew our story.
Ne-am despărțit. În mai, anul acesta.
In May of this year, Marianne committed suicide.
S-a sinucis.
He killed himself because he could not bear the pressure of isolation and fear. I had lived with the hope that one day we would stand together again. I loved him tremendously and could not believe I had lost him, but destiny took away this ultimate hope.
Dar destinul mi-a smuls în final și această ultimă speranță.
While the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission continues to uncover human rights abuses in other countries and works to provide asylum, back here in the United States, hate crimes against gays and lesbians are still on the rise. Just this past November, Roxana K. Ellis and Michelle Abdil, a lesbian couple known for their high-profile gay activism, were found brutally murdered in Medford, Oregon. According to the Anti-Violence Project, 151 gay and lesbian-related murders were committed since 1992, 60% of which were marked by an extraordinarily high level of gratuitous violence, or forensic overkill, reflecting intense hatred or disgust on the part of the perpetrator. From South Africa to Romania to Oregon, gays and lesbians all over the world are striving to live in a place free of violence and discrimination. As we saw earlier, a major new debate, both locally and nationally, is what America teaches its youth about gay and lesbian issues. Now there's a new book series by Chelsea House Publishers, which will add information and possibly fire to the discussion. Written specifically for high school students, this new series covers areas such as teen issues and homophobia, as well as profiling well-known gay and lesbian leaders.
I think most young adults do not. Especially gay and lesbian young adults, do not have role models. And so that underscores how important this series is.
This book, written by Randall Keenan, is the first of the series, and it's about the life and work of James Baldwin.
James Baldwin believed very much that love was more important than gender or color or national origin and anything of that matter.
Baldwin's first book, Go Tell It on the Mountain, is considered an American classic. But his second novel, Giovanni's Room, is the one that holds a special significance for gays and lesbians.
I don't think a lot of people realize how significant the publication of Giovanni's Room was. We must first remember this was in the late 50s, and that heretofore not many people had actually published works about same-sex love. So for James Baldwin to do it, and actually his American publisher refused to publish it, and it had to be published in England first, was a very bold and brave act.
An expatriate for most of his life, Baldwin returned to America to take an active part in the civil rights movement. He was scheduled to speak at the 1963 March on Washington, but its organizers, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, ultimately canceled his appearance.
The March on Washington in particular was a bittersweet experience because Baldwin had worked a great deal with the leaders of the march. And the leaders of the SCLC were particularly homophobic and were afraid of letting it known that Bayard Rustin and a number of other people who were working with them were actually gay and lesbian people. So at the last minute, they refused to let Baldwin speak on stage, which I think is one of America's greatest losses. Baldwin never denied the fact that he was what some people might call gay. He felt that he didn't want to be put in anybody's box. He felt already as an African American that that label was in and of itself restrictive when it was defined by someone other than himself. So he had a distrust for using the term gay because he felt it was not a term he himself defined. But he in no way allowed that to define who he fell in love with. So I think when people really read this book, especially young adult gay men and lesbians, they will see that Baldwin was first concerned with love, and secondly, with how we define ourselves.
We close this episode from the home where Martin Luther King was born, and with some music from the Lavender Light Black and People of All Colors Gospel Choir. From all of us at In the Life, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by the Gill Foundation, James C. Hormel, the Third National Gay and Lesbian Business and Consumer Expo, and In the Life's National Membership Network.